This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Millions of children at risk of starvation in northeast Nigeria amid rising insecurity. Former South African President Jacob Zuma is admitted to hospital days to his appearance in court. And we look at how Egyptian students are benefiting from scholarships from China. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua, live in Nairobi. Also joining me in studio, it's Ramanyang with your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the next 30 minutes. Egypt's central bank has left its key policy rates unchanged for the sixth consecutive meeting. And annual inflation in Zimbabwe has dropped to double-digit territory for the first time in at least 2 years. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Rama, thank you. In our top story, over 2 million children in northeastern Nigeria are at risk of starvation. Aid organization Save the Children estimates that 700,000 of those going hungry are under 5. The UN says the region is on the brink of a catastrophic food shortage. A combination of insecurity, climate change and COVID-19 has put a strain on the region. The northeastern part of the country has for many years been plagued by militant attacks. Boko Haram violence has displaced at least 2.7 million people. Let's get more on that story now. Tessem Akende joins us live now to dive deeper into the looming crisis from Jos. Tessem, it is quite a grim picture being painted by aid organizations. What are the underlying factors contributing to the hunger threat in northeast Nigeria?
Well, to start with, insurgency has been one of such factors. It has had over 350,000 people dead, killed as a result since it started about a decade ago. Many of these have been farmers, but their deaths has really affected the agricultural sector. So it's a it has taken a toll, on the sector, and of course brought hunger to not just the region, but the country as a whole, and of course by extension, other parts of the West African coast, because northern Nigeria is known for its arable nature. Most of the people in this part of the country are known for their agricultural exploits. So the insurgency has taken a toll on the sector very well. The UN estimated in a report released in earlier in the year, precisely in June, it estimated about 350,000 people to have been killed as a result of this insurgency. Several have been displaced. Many children are malnourished at the moment. In Jos here, where I'm talking from, we have many people displaced as well. They are dotted across the landscapes, across several states in the country. So many of these people have been farmers. So their displacement has really taken a toll on the agricultural sector. So the effect, there's a spiral down effect that has affected the sector generally. So there's hunger in the land as well. COVID-19 has also brought its issues. Several people, like across the world, several people have lost their job, and the northeastern part of the country has not been an exception at all. Now back to insurgency. Insurgency has brought about travel restrictions, and a region known for its arable nature, people from that region were very great farmers as well. There have been travel restrictions. Many who would normally carry their fish and other goods to countries within the Lake Chad Basin like Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, many of them have been distracted by or have been limited by travel restrictions. So there are several factors to this effect, but insurgency, a major factor, COVID-19, and of course climate change. About 65,000 people were displaced from Borno State last year, by climate change. And so these factors have greatly taken a toll on the food situation, and of course exposed several to hunger.
And Tessem, how is the government then responding to the humanitarian needs of those affected, given that the dire situation is a somewhat regular occurrence now.
Yes, the government has been carrying out several initiatives. Earlier in the year, it launched a $1 billion humanitarian plan for insurgency-ravaged communities in the northeastern part of the country, covering states like Borno, which has been the epicenter of insurgency. It also touches on states like Yobe and Adamawa, which are all in the northeastern part of the country. The government has also been quite decisive with its military forces, with its armed forces. It has been carrying out massive procurements of aircraft and fighting equipment. Just a few weeks ago, we had the arrival of 12 Super Tucano aircraft, which the government procured from the United States of America. 6 more are being expected in the coming days. So the government, beyond that, has also given, the president was in Borno State some weeks ago, where he gave marching orders to the military to ensure that this insurgency, is brought to a halt very soon. The government also earlier in the year, gave out climate resilient seeds to many farmers who are not displaced at the moment, to carry out about 8,000 of them to carry out a great harvest. It is expected that these climate resilient seeds will bring up about a bumper harvest, and of course it will reduce the hunger situation in the country. But generally, the government is also partnering with, there's a multinational joint task force which Nigeria is a part of, made up of countries within the Lake Chad area, talking about Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, all working together to ensure that insurgency is ended within the northeastern part of the country, and of course have, several millions of people within that part of the country relocate back to their ancestral lands and engage in farming, which has been their mainstay all their lives.
All right, Tessem, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. CGTN's Tessem Akende joining us from Jos, Nigeria. Well, let's now take a closer look at what more our correspondent Tessem Akende, who you just heard from there, prepared from the ground.
55-year-old Sarat Johanna works in the outskirts of Jos, north central Nigeria. She tills people's farms for little money so as to earn her living. She lost one of her 7 children and was displaced from her home in Borno State, hundreds of miles away, by an insurgency in 2014.
The memories are not good at all. Feeding was never a problem. I was farming and the yield was good. From it, we sold and paid the school fees of our children. But now we are displaced. I either help till people's farms for a small token or do other menial jobs to survive with my children.
The United Nations World Food Programme says 8.6 million people are facing food shortages in Nigeria's northeast alone, and many of them can't cultivate their farms due to an insurgency. It also says that nearly 350,000 people have died in the violence and over 2 million have been displaced internally. At least 76 rice farmers were killed in Borno State by suspected Boko Haram members in November last year. The WFP goes on to say that 300,000 children are suffering from acute malnutrition, while 4.3 million people rely entirely on food assistance in Nigeria. Experts say the government needs to do more to address the situation.
We all know that the bulk of food that is consumed in urban area is produced from the rural area. Now, the guys that are involved actively in these sectors have been forced to leave their ancestral home. Right now, they are living in the mega cities. So government have to, be up and doing to make sure that insecurity is defeated so that people can go back to their ancestral land to start all over what has been their major activities, which is farming.
Nigeria also faces the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. Last year, the International Committee of the Red Cross said more than 25,000 Nigerians were displaced by flooding in several parts of the country. The government says it is trying to address the problems. In June, President Muhammadu Buhari visited troops in Borno State, the epicenter of the insurgency in the country, where he gave them marching orders to end the war. He also launched a humanitarian project including 10,000 housing units, power plants, and agricultural schemes that will help alleviate the suffering of victims there. And millions of internally displaced people like Sarato hope these efforts will yield results so that they can return to their ancestral lands to farm and live better lives. Tessem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
To South Africa now, where former President Jacob Zuma has been admitted to an undisclosed hospital. In a statement, the Department of Correctional Services says the 79-year-old is undergoing a routine medical observation. As a former head of state, Zuma is treated at a military facility outside Estcourt Prison, where he is currently serving a 15-month jail sentence. Zuma snubbed a commission that is probing state corruption during his presidency. He is due to appear in court on Tuesday to face charges of corruption related to a 1999 arms deal made with French company Thales. Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has reshuffled his cabinet, making changes to key portfolios such as the Finance and Health Ministry. This is the first reshuffle of Ramaphosa's presidency since he was elected into office in 2019. The South African president says the cabinet shakeup is meant to increase the state's capacity to run the country. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
In a televised national address, President Cyril Ramaphosa told the nation that the reshuffle comes as the country is facing several challenges. These include the need to accelerate the vaccination program to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as ensuring peace and stability in the wake of the recent outbreak of violence and destruction in parts of the country. The urgency for changes in the cabinet was intensified after the security ministers were found unprepared for those violent outbreaks.
While calm has restored to the affected areas and our law enforcement agencies are working hard to bring those responsible to justice, we have acknowledged that our security services were found wanting in several respects. As part of the critical measures we are undertaking to strengthen our security services and to prevent a recurrence of these events.
In a major shake-up of the security sector, Ramaphosa axed Defense Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula and her state security counterpart, Ayanda Dlodlo. Dlodlo has been moved to another portfolio. Thandi Modise, former Speaker of the National Assembly, will be the new Defense Minister. The President also disbanded the State Security Ministry, moving the function to the Presidency.
This is to ensure that the country's domestic and foreign intelligence services more effectively enable the President to exercise his responsibility to safeguard the security and integrity of the nation.
Another major change is in the Health Ministry. The Deputy Health Minister, Joe Pahla, will now head that ministry. Pahla replaces Zweli Mkhize, who has resigned. Mkhize was put on special leave after being implicated in a corruption scandal involving his department.
As this administration, as this collective, we are unwavering in our determination to build a capable state, one which is ably led and which effectively serves the needs of the people of our country.
South Africa also has a new finance minister, Enoch Godongwana. He replaces Tito Mboweni, who also tendered his resignation. The president also announced an expert panel that will lead investigations into the chaos, violent outbreaks and looting that unfolded last month. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. When we return, amid a surge in COVID-19 infections, Tunisian president calls for medicines to be made more affordable. And find out why a suggested way of controlling teenage pregnancies in Zimbabwe is raising controversy.
This is the Masai Mara, the scene of one of nature's greatest spectacles. This unbelievable sight is continuing to unfold before our very eyes. From June each year, the plains of the Mara thunder under the hooves of up to 2 million wildebeest, crossing into Kenya from Tanzania's Serengeti. But with all these players bearing their best on nature's stage, even the sideshows are bound to captivate and amaze. Join CGTN from August 9th through 18th as we take in the sights, sounds, and adventure of 2021's Mara Migration.
Welcome back. Let's turn to Europe now, where German leaders are reported to be in talks about new restrictions that could dramatically curb access to public life for people who've refused a COVID-19 vaccine. The proposed rules are among the toughest in Europe and would come into effect next month. Ryan Thompson reports from Frankfurt.
Life has found a new corona normal here in Germany. People are out and about, seeing friends, enjoying summer beer gardens, and amazingly, despite the spread of the Delta variant, infections remain relatively low here. But Germany's health ministry knows that this type of situation cannot last forever. In recent weeks, it's prepared a number of new policies to offset a potential surge in cases in the fall and winter months that could eventually lead to a fragile health situation. This includes new variants, breakthrough infections in the vaccinated, and the wearing off of some shots. For starters, the government's goal is still to get as many people vaccinated as possible, and refusing the vaccine will begin to make life much more difficult. According to leaked documents seen by German media, as soon as next month, unvaccinated people could be excluded from many areas of public life. Hotels, restaurants, sports facilities, and large gatherings, both inside and outdoors. If cases remain low, unvaccinated people will still be able to do these activities by presenting a negative test. But by the middle of October, this will no longer be free. If cases reach dangerous levels, the health ministry says the testing option will fall by the wayside because it's no longer considered a valid safeguard. In this case, only people who have recovered from the virus or been fully vaccinated will be able to partake in their favorite pastimes. Many Germans are also expecting to be called for a third booster shot sometime this winter. The first round of these will begin in September, just over 9 months from the point when the country began its inoculation campaign. But the decision is causing a bit of backlash, not domestically, but with international organizations like the World Health Organization. They say that nations that are giving these booster shots are ignoring their appeals to hold off on these doses until poorer nations can vaccinate themselves first. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
The Tunisian president is calling for the lowering of prices of medicines as the North African nation battles the coronavirus pandemic. This comes after President Kais Saied implemented wide-ranging political measures. Adnan Shawashi has more details from Tunis.
President Saied received the Director General of the Tunisian Central Pharmacy, the President of the National Council of Pharmacists, and the Secretary General of the Union of Pharmacists. The head of state urged private pharmacists to reduce by as much as possible the prices of medicines in the country.
I do not doubt that private pharmacies can contribute and support the national effort at this historical moment by reducing the prices of medicines. Help with your own means, and because it's your responsibility to help the poor and disadvantaged people.
The representatives of the syndicates of pharmacists and private medical practitioners say the Central Pharmacy of Tunisia needs to indicate the medicines that will be targeted by the president's decision.
The hike in prices of medicine is due to inflation in the domestic and international markets, especially for imports. Now professionals are discussing how to lower prices and the impact on the population. This is a symbolic gesture to encourage other sectors to do the same.
President Saied lauded the role played by private pharmacists in responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Some 1,500 private pharmacies have volunteered to boost the ongoing COVID-19 vaccinations.
The vaccination in pharmacies is important because this operation will step up vaccination campaign and break the chain of infection. However, pharmacists need some guarantees because of the possible side effects of getting the COVID-19 vaccine. We must remain vigilant.
Tunisia's vaccination platform, EVAX, has been updated by the health department to include a section for volunteer pharmacies. Following President Kais Said's diplomatic efforts, Tunisia has recently received tons of medical aid and medicines from friendly countries. The head of state has also urged some 2,200 private pharmacies to join the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
To South Africa now, which continues to battle the impact of a third wave of COVID-19. The Western Cape region has once again become an epicenter for infections. CGTN's Travers Andrews has the details.
The Western Cape region is at the peak of a COVID-19 third wave, which is straining its healthcare system. The province's hospitals are full, and the health department has made available 528 field hospital beds to accommodate COVID-19 patients. More than 400,000 people in the province have so far been infected with COVID-19, and the numbers are still going up.
We are heading towards our third wave peak. We currently have just over 40,000 active cases in the province, and on a daily basis we see over 3,000 new cases on a daily basis, and we are admitting 343 people to hospital on a daily basis, and unfortunately we are also seeing about 108 deaths per day on a daily basis, obviously. And these numbers are obviously quite huge and quite staggering.
According to health officials, the peak of the COVID-19 third wave could last between 7 to 10 days. In efforts to combat the virus, the province has been actively stepping up its vaccination program, with over 1.1 million people already inoculated. While 2 COVID-19 vaccines are currently approved for use in South Africa, China's Sinovac vaccine is also set to be used.
The Sinovac has recently been SAHPRA approved for use in South Africa. At the moment, we're still waiting on the National Department of Health to indicate when, how, and in what quantities the Sinovac would come to South Africa, so that we can obviously begin planning the implementation of Sinovac.
For now, all eyes remain on the healthcare system and how it copes with what continues to be a devastating COVID-19 third wave. Now, the Western Cape's Department of Health says that in addition to the 528 field hospital beds that have already been opened, they're also considering opening an additional 787 beds. Now, this is to further mitigate the pressure being placed on public hospitals to provide acute care for trauma patients. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, estimates that 40% of all school-aged children across Eastern and Southern Africa are currently not in school. This is in part due to COVID-19-induced closures, although some of the children were already out of learning institutions before the coronavirus outbreak. The agency says the pandemic has shown that school closures have wide-reaching damage. CGTN's Yolisan Jamila has more details.
As South African schools reopen, millions of school pupils in other countries in the Eastern and Southern African region are forced to stay home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Uganda have all closed schools, while Zimbabwe announced it was extending the winter break. Rwanda and Mozambique, on the other hand, have closed schools in hotspot infection areas. According to UNICEF, this equates to 32 million children forced to stay at home, and that is in addition to the 37 million children who were already out of school before the pandemic. Apart from learning lost, UNICEF says school closures deny children safe spaces.
Schools are a place where boys and girls access far more than learning. They can often provide a link to other services, importantly immunization or counseling. And for many, schools provide their one nutritious meal of the day as well.
Jones says few children have been able to take advantage of remote learning, as millions of children do not have access to a computer, smartphone, or the internet.
We've seen in the pandemic around the world, many countries, they sort of seamlessly move to online learning. But for children many children in this region, that was just simply not possible when, 1 in 5 households in Eastern and Southern Africa, do not have access to the internet.
Currently, 12 out of 21 schools in the Eastern and Southern African region have fully open schools, and 3 have partially open schools. UNICEF has urged all governments to prioritize education to ensure that schools remain open and safe for the sake of the individual child and the future of their communities and countries.
One of the most important things they can do is allocate, more funding or up their funding for funds for ensuring sufficient ventilation within schools, to make sure that there's social distancing is possible by having enough desks and chairs. And of course, one of the most important things, ensuring that there is water points, clean water and soap, so that pupils and teachers, others in the school environment can be washing their hands regularly.
The Children's Agency points to growing evidence that shows that children in schools are not the main drivers of the pandemic. Yudhisan Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Zimbabwe, a campaign to allow use of birth control methods among teenage girls is ongoing. A human rights group is urging the government to ensure teens access contraceptives easily without having to get consent from their parents. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with that story.
Making contraceptives available to teenagers in Zimbabwe, the human rights group says, is a step in the right direction. Their campaign is based on a recent surge in pregnancy rates among underage girls in the South African country.
Making information available, giving them an option that if they decide to indulge in sexual activities, they have contraceptives, they have information on safe sex. Currently, they don't have anything, but then what is this helping us? It's not helping anything. We have an outrage of teenage pregnancy, so why not contain the situation by making these contraceptives are available?
Government statistics show that between January and February this year, 5,000 pregnancies were reported in Zimbabwe. The spike is blamed on the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns and schools closure. Fungai, not her real name, conceived at only 15. Seen as a disgrace to her family, some relatives disowned her. She now wishes she had more information on reproductive health and probably access to birth control aids.
Getting pregnant when you are still young is not easy. It places a strain on your physical and mental well-being. When I got pregnant, my understanding of sexual reproductive health was limited, so I fell for peer pressure and I ended up dating an older guy.
The Shamwari non-governmental organization argues that teens do not need consent from their parents to acquire the contraceptives. Topics such as sex education and reproductive health may be a hard sell in a conservative society like Zimbabwe. Previous efforts, according to some, have been unfruitful.
There have been efforts in Zimbabwe to put about comprehensive sexuality education, which is age-appropriate at different levels. But most parents, remember from the social cultural background that you're coming from, they are not ready for their children to be told about that. But we are not giving children a manual to have sex. We are just defining what sex is, how it is done, the effects, and what can result as a result of that.
It is not guaranteed the government will buy the NGO's idea. And in the event that it does, fewer girls, it is hoped, will fall victim to early pregnancy. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
To North Africa, where Algeria has been facing a heat wave since early July. Temperatures in parts of the North African country reached up to 51 degrees Celsius last month. The high temperatures have continued, forcing citizens to constantly seek ways of avoiding exposure to the sun. Here is how some Algerians are dealing with the rising temperatures.
The heat wave may be caused by global warming, but the big problem is the suffering of citizens from electricity cuts during periods of rising heat, as well as the quarantine that prevents the movement of citizens.
Personally, this wave of intense heat obliged me to move in the evening and at night only. The rest of the day, I hid with my family at home. I'm sure that the consumption of electricity has increased due to the use of cooling devices.
Right, well, let's now go to Rama for the latest business news.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business. Egypt's central bank leaves its key policy rates unchanged for a 6th consecutive meeting. And annual inflation in Zimbabwe drops to the double-digit territory for the first time in 2 years.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market, it's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in North Africa. Egypt's central bank kept its policy rates unchanged during its most recent Monetary Policy Committee meeting on Thursday. The committee kept the overnight lending rate at 9.25% and the overnight deposit rate at 8.25% for a sixth consecutive time. That's after cutting rates in September and November last year. According to the central bank headline, inflation in Egypt did go up to 4.9% in June from 4.8% in the month of May. The bank also says that the slight uptick in June was driven by higher annual inflation of food items. That did go up to 3.4% in the month. In the meantime, annual non-food inflation did decline. It went down to 5.6% in June from 6.3% in May. That is the lowest recorded level since June 2014. On the opposite end of the continent, let's head over to South Africa. The embattled national carrier, South African Airways, has taken a step towards flying once again. That comes after it was granted a renewed operating license by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. SA is eyeing resuming domestic flights in September, and it's rebooting some international services in November too. It says all management and specialist pilot appointments have been concluded. SA came out of business rescue in April. It suspended flight when South Africa went into level 5 lockdown in March. Since then, senior management have attempted to steer this airline through a formal business rescue process. Now, Zimbabwe's annual inflation has receded to double-digit territory for the first time in at least 2 years. Inflation figures for July were at around 56.37% compared to 106.6% in the month of June. Here's Mahia Mutua with the details from Harare.
From a peak of 837.5% in July 2020, Zimbabwe's inflation has been on a steady descent, dropping to 56.37% in July this year. Authorities claim the slowdown is due to fiscal reforms, but some believe the figures are not a true reflection of reality due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
That downward pressure on inflation is just because business is slow. There's no business at the moment. So what we have is a reflection of yesterday's prices, because we are still looking at yesterday's stocks, where still there's not enough consumption for even businesses, and some are not even in operation at the moment.
The statistics also do not take into account the structure of the economy.
76% of employment is now informal. The informal economy is contributing 62% to GDP. So a lot of the developments that are taking place in the informal economy are hidden from these official numbers.
That's why some here believe the country is not out of the woods just yet, as it faces several downside risks.
Among them, increased wage demands from public servants, a foreign currency black market, and growing government debt. All these mean there's more to do, especially if citizens are to start feeling the difference.
We may reach 30%, 50% by year end, but again, it's neither here nor there, because already we are saying prices in Zimbabwe are on the very high side, and as long as they are on the very high side, it means competitiveness is affected, productivity is affected, and return on investment is affected, and that affects our investment outlook. So yes, we are celebrating this slowdown. It's good. We need to maintain the momentum, but I think there's still a lot of challenges that we need to grapple with. We need to continue with monetary prudence. We need to institute more institutional reforms around the parastatals because government still continues to subsidize. We need, I think, to also manage our debt levels.
Zimbabwe's central bank has forecast annual inflation to slow down to 25% by year end. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's head back up north. Tunisia's President Kais Saied has called on the country's banks and financial institutions to lower retail interest rates in order to make available much cheaper funding for enterprises. Tunisia has been facing years of economic crises, which have been compounded by this COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing political crisis in the North African state. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
The head of state called on the North African states, banking and financial sectors to make more sacrifices during this exceptional period and to stand by the Tunisian people.
I invite you to make additional efforts and to reduce as much as possible the interest rate so that a share of it would go to the national community. I think that is not difficult for you. I invite you to contribute in this historical national effort.
The Tunisian Professional Union of Banks and Financial Institutions announced that the public and the private sectors will follow the president's economic policies.
The president's pieces of advice are important and valuable on the role of banks and financial institutions in facing the economic, health and social situation. The solutions proposed by the president are our responsibility. We will follow these instructions to improve the economic and the social situation.
President Said also received the governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia. The head of state noted that Tunisia is able to overcome obstacles with the will of its people and the support of its friends.
I want to talk to you about the financial situation. We have friendly and brotherly countries who are ready to offer financial support. This will help Tunisia unwind its financial imbalances and meet internal and external commitments.
On July 25th, President Said sacked the country's prime minister and decided to freeze parliament in order to implement structural political, economic and social reforms. The North African state's president affirmed that there is no place in today's Tunisia for injustice, extortion or confiscation of money from businessmen, pointing out that economic rights are preserved under the law and the constitution. Analysts assert that Tunisia is facing an unprecedented economic and social crisis. The head of state declared that this difficult situation has been exacerbated by the political crisis in the country. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's step out of the continent now. US job growth rose quite solidly in July amid demand for workers in the labor-intensive services sectors. Official data from the US Labor Department shows that non-farm payrolls went up by 943,000 jobs last month. That's much higher than the market expected. The increase came on the back of robust job openings in the labor-intensive sectors. Official data shows that the unemployment rate fell by 50 basis points to 5.4% from the level in June. In the meantime, job openings went up to a record 9.2 million due to labour shortages. This much stronger US employment numbers, however, might be interrupted by surging Delta variant infections right across the country. And finally, in Europe, German factory activity did continue to slow down their post-pandemic recovery in June, mostly because of raw material and component shortages. Production is up 5.1% in the month of June compared to last year's low base, according to the German Federal Statistics Agency. That was a steep fall from the double-digit growths in the previous 2 months. The fall was driven by a drop in the production of capital goods like machinery and vehicles. Consumer goods output, however, did keep rising. Authorities also cited semiconductor shortages as a major and ongoing concern. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at Ethiopia. Authorities over there have cleared the way for Safaricom to introduce its popular mobile money service in a market of 110 million people. What exactly does this mean for the company? Investors clearly liked it, but what does this mean for Ethiopian nationals as well? We'll explore that in a bit more detail at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Rama, thank you. Well, still ahead here on Africa Live. We look at how Egyptian students are benefiting from scholarships from China.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, many students from all across Africa have hugely benefited from scholarships offered by China. Egypt is one of the first countries that established scholarships and exchange of student programs with China. In recent years, Beijing has boosted the number of scholarships available for Egyptian students. In 2019, for example, Egypt had nearly 2,000 students benefiting and studying in Chinese universities. Adel Mahroui has more details.
When he graduated, Ahmed Khalil was among the top students in Asyut University's business school in Egypt. As a teaching assistant who earned his master's degree, Ahmed began to prepare for his PhD to pursue a successful teaching career. To him, China was the best place to continue his postgraduate studies.
I looked and applied for scholarships in many countries, and I got accepted in several, but I preferred China. It is a trade giant, which is the field of my research. That can give me access to many cases to study. I can also work properly on trade statistics. Moreover, the application procedures are simple. There are several protocols between Egyptian and Chinese universities, which makes the process easy.
He benefited from a 2016 MOU between Egypt and China that offers full scholarships with living expenses for 400 Egyptian graduate students, valid until 2020. After staying in China for 6 months in 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted his degree course. Yet Ahmed says he gained a lot of experience during that period.
I benefited a lot in that limited time. In Egypt, the methods of education are different. In China, they focus on how to benefit from the information rather than only to acquire knowledge. I've seen how professors deal with students there, and I'll try to apply that attitude. I got exposed to many cultures and nationalities there, which has widened my scope of understanding the world.
Ahmed's teaching style changed, which in turn is affecting dozens of students at his university. Because of the pandemic, it is still not clear when he will go back to continue his research. In the meantime, he's practicing Mandarin to enhance his communication skills with his friends and colleagues. Besides his university life exposure, Ahmed says his experience in China changed his lifestyle.
I struggled first with the food, but after some time, I got used to it. Their dishes are such healthier than Egyptian ones, which use a lot of fat. I was 96 kilograms when I traveled. I came back 81 kilograms. Like them, I stopped eating at 7 in the evening. I began playing sports daily. In China, you get surrounded by areas designated for practicing sports.
In 2019, Egypt had nearly 2,000 students in China, studying in all fields. Education and cultural cooperation between the two nations is exemplary. It started in 1931, and after the foundation of the People's Republic of China, it began developing some more and even further in 1955. Yet since 2014 and 2016, when the presidents of the two countries exchange visits, education cooperation has developed greatly, leading to the establishment of the first Chinese university in Egypt, the Middle East and Africa. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, International Beer Day is marked around the globe on August the 6th every year. In Nigeria, burukutu is a popular alcoholic beverage prepared from sorghum. The drink is widely consumed in rural areas of northern Nigeria. Local brewers have been thriving despite trouble with police who enforce religious restrictions. Nokutula Shabalala tells us more.
In Kano State in northern Nigeria, Janet Peter is preparing a drink known as burukutu. She is among many locals engaging in this age-old tradition.
I do this because I grew up watching my mother and members of my family prepare the brew back in my village. When I moved to town and could not find a job, I decided to start making this.
She has to sort, wash and soak the sorghum, then air-dry it before blending and cooking. The whole process takes up to 5 days. Janet must have batches in various stages of preparation at any given time so that she has enough supply for her daily sales.
Even the rich people drink it. We the sellers know these things. They come here and park their vehicles and buy bukurutu, worth tens of thousands of naira. They take it home and freeze it. They drink it regularly, and when they run out, they come back again.
Brewers like Janet are a target for the Hisbah, the religious police in charge of enforcing Islamic law, which is in place in 12 of Nigeria's northern states. The religious police chased her away from her last brewing site, and she now works from a restaurant that provides some cover from the Hisbah.
Many people like it, so we are pleading with the government to let us continue with this business because burukutu is loved and enjoyed. We do not want to be displaced so that we can continue having an income to help take care of our families. We do not have or know any other job.
The homemade beer is thick and has a vinegar-like flavor, and is still widely consumed and considered to be nutritious.
It's a natural drink. You can take it. Nothing will hammer you in on your system. That is why I like it. It's not a chemical. Beer chemical day, ogogoro chemical day, but this one is a natural where they burn them, everything do okay.
A 4-liter bucket costs around $1.22. Janet sells between 40 to 80 liters a day. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Time for the sport. Kenya's Faith Kipyegon retained